The air raid siren wailed its mournful call across the prisoner of war camp, piercing the still Oklahoma night. Lieutenant Anton Ellis pressed his back against the wooden barracks wall, his German uniform hanging loose on his frame after months of captivity. Through the small window, he watched searchlights sweep across the yard as guards rushed to their posts. "They test the sirens even here," his bunkmate Fisher muttered. "As if the Japanese would bomb a prison camp in the middle of America." Anton said nothing. He'd learned to keep his thoughts private during his 3 months at Camp Grubber. Before his Luftwaffe plane had been shot down over North Africa, he'd believed in the inevitability of German victory. Now, thousands of miles from home, victory seemed as distant as the stars overhead. In his pocket, he fingered the worn photograph of his parents in Berlin. Their last letter had been filled with proud proclamations of German strength, but between the lines, Anton sensed their fear. Berlin was being bombed nightly. Food was scarce. And here he sat, safe but useless, while his homeland burned. "Music again tonight," Fisher said, cocking his head toward the recreation hall where American guards sometimes gathered. "They play their jazz when they think we're sleeping." Anton nodded absently. The Americans' music bothered him less than it did the other officers. Some nights, he even found himself drawn to the strange, forbidden rhythms that seemed to speak of a freedom he'd been taught to despise. "Better to block your ears," he said, repeating the words his commanding officers had drilled into them. American music corrupts German discipline. But even as he spoke, Anton knew he no longer fully believed it. The war had already stripped away many certainties. What was left but duty? A soldier survived by focusing only on the next day, the next meal, the next letter home. Love, connection, understanding the enemy, these were luxuries that would only weaken resolve. After lights out, Anton lay awake, listening to the soft snores of 24 German officers. His mind wandered to the letters he'd written home, careful, censored accounts that revealed nothing of his growing doubts about the war. To admit such thoughts would devastate his parents, who had sacrificed everything for the Reich. As midnight approached, Anton slipped from his bunk and moved silently to the window. In the distance, light spilled from the recreation hall, and faint music drifted across the compound. Something pulled him toward it, curiosity, perhaps, or simply the need to escape the stifling barracks. Without fully understanding why, he eased open the door and stepped into the cool night air. Captain Grace Edwards adjusted the needle on the record player, smiling as Glenn Miller's Moonlight Serenade filled the small recreation hall. The 45th Medical Company had been assigned to Camp Grubber only 2 weeks earlier, and these late-night sessions were her only respite from the endless work of the camp hospital. "You're going to wear that record out, Gracie," said Nurse Peterson, sinking into a chair with a cup of coffee. "Then I'll buy another when I get home," Grace replied, closing her eyes as the music washed over her. "Besides, who knows when that'll be?" The recreation hall, just beyond the administrative area of the camp, had become an unofficial gathering place for the medical staff after their evening shifts. Far enough from the prisoner barracks that they could relax without being constantly reminded of their charges. Grace had treated wounded men for 2 years, first in England during the Blitz, then in field hospitals in North Africa. She'd seen enough mangled bodies to last several lifetimes. But nothing had prepared her for the strange limbo of this POW camp, where enemy soldiers became patients and the battle lines blurred into something more complicated. "Did you treat that lieutenant today?" The aviator with the burned hands. Peterson asked. "Ellis," Grace said, nodding. "He's healing well, considering. Another week and he'll have full mobility back." "Handsome devil," Peterson remarked. "For a Nazi." Grace frowned slightly. "We're doctors and nurses first. Remember that." "Easy for you to say." My brother's still fighting them in Italy. Grace understood Peterson's bitterness. Her own brother had been killed at Kasserine Pass. For months afterward, she'd nursed a cold hatred for every German soldier who crossed her path. It was simpler that way, to see them as faceless enemies rather than men with families and fears of their own. Our job is to heal, she said firmly. What happens after that is for others to decide. As she spoke, movement at the window caught her eye. A face appeared briefly, pale, watchful, before disappearing back into the darkness. One of the prisoners, she realized with a start. Out after curfew. Grace should have reported it immediately. Camp regulations were clear. Instead, she found herself walking to the door, peering out into the shadowed yard. Grace? What is it? Peterson called. Nothing, she answered. Just getting some air. Outside, the night was clear and star-filled. Grace stepped away from the building's light, allowing her eyes to adjust. There, a figure slipping between buildings, moving like a shadow across the compound. She recognized him instantly. Lieutenant Ellis, the pilot she'd been treating for burns. The man who barely spoke during his medical examinations, whose eyes never quite met hers. Without thinking of the consequences, Grace followed. Anton froze when he heard footsteps behind him. Discovered. He'd be sent to the isolation barracks, perhaps worse. He turned slowly, prepared to offer what explanation he could. It was the American doctor, the woman who had treated his hands with gentle efficiency. Her Red Cross armband caught the moonlight. Lieutenant Ellis, she said quietly. You're out after curfew. Anton straightened. I apologize, Doctor. I heard music. She studied him, her expression unreadable in the darkness. You risked punishment to listen to American jazz. I know how it sounds, he admitted. But in the barracks, he searched for the English word. Suffocating. To his surprise, she didn't immediately call for a guard. Instead, she glanced back toward the recreation hall. Glenn Miller, she said. Do you know his music? Anton shook his head. Such music was discouraged in Germany. Forbidden, you mean? There was no accusation in her voice, only a simple statement of fact. Yes, he acknowledged. Entartete music. Degenerate music. The doctor was silent for a moment. Then she made a decision that would change everything. Come with me, she said. 5 minutes. Then you go back to your barracks, and I didn't see you tonight. Anton hesitated. This could be a trap. But something in her eye suggested otherwise. Why would you do this? He asked. Because sometimes, she said quietly, we all need a moment of normal in the middle of madness. She led him to a small storage shed behind the recreation hall, where the music filtered through the walls. Inside, spare chairs and tables were stacked neatly. A small window let in moonlight. No one comes here at night, she explained, leaving the door slightly ajar. 5 minutes, Lieutenant. That's all I can risk. They stood in awkward silence as the music played, a slow, melancholy melody that seemed to speak of distant homes and lost peace. My name is Grace, she said suddenly. Dr. Grace Edwards. Anton nodded formally. Lieutenant Anton Ellis, Luftwaffe. I know, she replied with the ghost of a smile. I've been treating your hands for a week. As they stood in the small shed, the music swirling around them, Anton felt something shift inside him, as if a wall carefully constructed by years of military training had developed its first crack. It's beautiful, he admitted. The music. Yes, she said simply. It is. When the song ended, Grace moved toward the door. Time's up, Lieutenant. Anton followed her out into the night. Before they parted, he turned to her. Thank you, Dr. Edwards. For what? She asked. For 5 minutes of normal, he answered, echoing her words. As he slipped back toward the prisoner barracks, Anton knew something fundamental had changed. And for the first time since his capture, he wondered what he would write in his next letter home. The next morning, Grace examined Anton's hands with clinical precision, aware of the guard watching from the corner of the examination room. Flex your fingers, she instructed, avoiding his eyes. Anton complied. His burns were healing well, another week and he wouldn't need to visit the infirmary anymore. The thought brought an unexpected pang. The pain is less, he said formally. Good. Continue the exercises we discussed. As she released his hands, their fingers brushed briefly. Neither acknowledged it. That night, Anton wrote to his parents, staring at the blank page for long minutes before beginning. Dearest Mother and Father, the Americans treat us correctly here. There is enough food. My hands are healing under the care of their doctors. Last night, I heard music from their recreation hall, Glenn Miller, a popular American composer. It made me think of the concerts we attended in Berlin before everything changed. Remember how we would walk home afterward, humming the melodies? Strange how music can transport us across time and distance. He paused, pen hovering over the page. Such words might never pass the censors. And yet, he continued writing, something inside him needing to speak truths he was only beginning to acknowledge. That night, Anton again slipped from the barracks after midnight. And again, Dr. Edwards was waiting by the storage shed, a small radio clutched in her hands. This is dangerous, she said as he approached. Yes, he agreed. For both of us. 5 minutes, she repeated, but they both knew it was a lie. Inside the shed, she tuned the radio to a distant station, keeping the volume low. Benny Goodman's clarinet filled the small space. Why are you doing this? Anton asked. Grace set the radio down carefully. My brother was killed in North Africa, she said. For months afterward, I couldn't see a German uniform without feeling hate. Anton stiffened. I understand. I should go. No, she interrupted. That's not why I told you. I'm telling you because that hate was destroying me. And one day, I treated a German POW who had a picture of his daughter. She looked just like my niece. She met his eyes. It became harder to see monsters. Anton was silent for a long moment. Then he said, Berlin is being bombed almost nightly now. My parents. I don't know if they're alive. The letters take so long. I'm sorry, she said, and he knew she meant it. When they parted that night, Grace handed him something, a small notebook. For your thoughts, she said simply. Some things can't be sent in letters. Their midnight meetings continued, 5 minutes becoming 10, then 30. Always with music playing softly in the background. They spoke of home, of the world before war, of books and memories and dreams deferred. Anton began writing 2 sets of letters, formal ones that would pass the censors, and raw, honest ones in the notebook that he knew could never be sent. The music they call jazz has a freedom in it that I never understood before, he wrote. It speaks of possibilities, of choices, of humanity without uniformity. I find myself wondering what else I have been wrong about. June 1944 brought news of the Allied invasion of Normandy. The mood in the camp darkened as German prisoners realized their country was now being attacked from both east and west. Guards became more vigilant, prisoners more desperate. "No more meetings," Grace told Anton during his final medical check. "The camp commander has ordered increased night patrols." Anton nodded, his face betraying nothing. "My hands have healed completely, Doctor. Thank you for your care." But that night, he still came to the storage shed, and Grace was waiting, her face tight with worry. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "If they catch you now, I had to see you," he interrupted. "There are rumors we're being transferred. Another camp, further west." The news hit Grace like a physical blow. She'd known this moment would come, had prepared herself for it. Still, the reality was harder than she'd imagined. When? Soon. Days, perhaps. They stood in silence, the forbidden music between them saying what they could not. "I'll find a way to write," Anton said finally. "After the war." "The war could last years," Grace replied, her professional calm slipping for the first time. "Then I will wait years." A searchlight swept across the yard outside, coming dangerously close to the shed. They pressed back against the wall, holding their breath until it passed. "You should go," Grace whispered. Anton reached for her hand in the darkness, his fingers intertwining with hers. "What happened here, in this place, it has changed me, Grace. Changed how I see everything." "We're enemies," she reminded him, though the word had lost its meaning months ago. "No," he said firmly. "We are two people who found something human in an inhuman time." The searchlight returned, this time stopping directly on the shed. A voice called out, "Who's there?" "Step out immediately." In the final moment before discovery, Anton pressed something into Grace's hand, his notebook, filled with the words he could never send home. "Keep this," he whispered. "Until after." Then the door burst open, and their stolen world of midnight music ended. Lieutenant Anton Ellis was sent to the isolation barracks for 2 weeks, then transferred with a group of officers to a camp in Arizona. Grace Edwards was reprimanded severely, nearly court-martialed, but her spotless record and the desperate need for medical personnel spared her the worst consequences. She was reassigned to a military hospital in San Francisco, treating wounded soldiers returning from the Pacific. The notebook remained hidden among her possessions, read late at night when memories became too sharp to ignore. The war ground on. Germany's defeats mounted. In April 1945, news came of Hitler's suicide, and in May, of Germany's unconditional surrender. Grace continued her work, even as hospitals emptied and doctors and nurses were discharged. She had nowhere particular to go, no one waiting. Her parents had died before the war, her brother was gone, and the apartment she'd once called home now belonged to someone else. In her rare free hours, she visited the Red Cross offices, searching prisoner registers, repatriation lists, trying to find one name among thousands. But the chaos of post-war Europe made tracking individuals nearly impossible. Then in November 1945, as she finished her shift at the now-quiet hospital, a package arrived, postmarked from New York, addressed in a familiar hand. Inside was a record, Glenn Miller's Moonlight Serenade, and a note with an address in Brooklyn. 2 days later, Grace stood on a narrow street in Brooklyn, before a modest boarding house. Her heart raced as she climbed the steps and knocked. When the door opened, Anton stood before her, a thinner, older, dressed in civilian clothes, but unmistakably himself. "You found me," he said simply. "You found me first," she replied. He led her inside to a small room where a record player sat in the corner. "I was released in August," he explained. "Germany, there's nothing to go back to now. My parents died in the bombing of Berlin last year. I'm so sorry, Anton. The Red Cross helped me come here. There's a community of Germans starting over. He gestured to the sparse room. It's not much, but it's a beginning. And the music? Grace asked, nodding toward the record player. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. The first thing I bought. To remind me. Grace reached into her bag and withdrew the notebook, worn from frequent reading. I brought this back to you. Anton took it, his fingers brushing hers. Did you read it? Every word, she admitted. It helped me remember why we do what we do, heal, not harm. Anton set the notebook down and moved to the record player. The familiar strains of Moonlight Serenade filled the small room. I used to think that duty was everything, he said quietly. That love was a luxury for peacetime. That understanding the enemy was weakness. He turned to face her. I was wrong about so many things. We all were, Grace replied. That's what war does. Anton held out his hand, the same hand she had healed months earlier in a prisoner of war camp where music after midnight had changed everything. Grace Edwards, he said, will you dance with me? Not in a storage shed this time. Not in secret. Grace stepped into his arms, no longer doctor and patient, American and German, victor and vanquished. Just two people who had found each other across impossible divides. What happens now? She asked. Now, Anton said, we write a new letter. Together. About what comes after war. As they danced in the fading autumn light, Grace rested her head against his shoulder, feeling for the first time in years the promise of peace, not just between nations, but within herself. Outside, Brooklyn continued its bustling life, a city of immigrants and new beginnings. Inside, Glenn Miller played, and two people who had first connected through forbidden music after midnight began to imagine a future neither had dared hope for during the long, dark years of war.